Hello, everyone. I'm just now starting this broadcast. Let me check, see how everything's going. I'll give some people time to join. Okay, as you join, please let me know that you're in here. You can send me a message, post in the chat. All right, so I don't want to hold on too long. Hopefully more people join. So caveat, so many of you probably, hey Jamal, so many of you are probably aware, I don't really do live streams too much. The reason is because I have a young son, a 1.5-year-old, so I'm going to be getting up frequently, I'm sure, to check on him or to give him things, so please don't let that throw you off. So while more people join, I'm just going to start explaining what exactly the purpose of this book that I wrote, Fostering False Identity, was. And actually, let me make sure that I put the book description in the chat. So if many of you might have known, so I worked as a child welfare attorney for a few years. And while working in the system, what kind of became apparent to me was that there was a lot of things going on that I couldn't necessarily explain. I say I couldn't explain it because in my mind, I believed that this was an equitable system for helping children. That's at least what the system told us it was for. If you look at what foster care purports to be, they say it's for the health, safety, and well-being of children. But things were adding up. If you look at just how the system reacts to problems in society, that to me was evident that this really was a larger agenda to control a population that has become uncontrollable to many in a dominant society. Now, it's not easily apparent as far as how this is happening or as far as how the child welfare system is doing these things. And that's why I decided to start doing research and studying to learn more about what components go into creating really what I felt like was a system of social control. So when I started doing research, I started uncovering a lot of things that you're not told when you work inside of the system. If any of you are caseworkers, for example, or if any of you are child welfare attorneys or anything like that, it might become very evident that it looks like the link to the book's not working. So let me see if I can submit it a different way. But if any of you work in the system, it's very apparent that something's going on, but no one can actually point to what is the center of racism inside of this system. So I wrote this book, one, because I felt like the system kind of needed outed as far as the racism that exists inside of it, but also because I think that there has to be a real mandate in the Black community for us to organize among ourselves. If we're not organizing our families, then that is the central vehicle to subjugate a people. If you think about it, we have the Black community, but communities are made up of families. So if you don't have families, if you have a bunch of individuals who are fighting each other, who are destroyed, who cannot relate to one another, and these people are trying to function as a community, that's just not going to happen. So it's not a lot of emphasis put on the Black family, put on mending the issues inside of our family. that's really why I wanted to write this book, because number one, on a certain level, we have to understand that this is a racist system that a lot of us encounter. And I know many African people in the US, we encounter the racist child welfare system. And at the other hand of it, we have to understand that this is on us to organize. We can't expect for people to organize for our behalf, or for people who control the dominant society to mean well for us. So I hope those toys in the background aren't too loud. Let me know if they are. But so yeah, so that was the mandate of the book. Thank you, Kareem. Said the book was very well done. So I'm gonna actually put an invite link inside of the chat also, in case anyone wants to ask questions whenever I finish this brief presentation. And you can join that link, and it should take you into the room. And if you want to have any questions to ask, I can allow you to ask on live on air. Why do you have Amazon? You now have to. Why do you have the Amazon? You now have to pay. I'm not exactly sure about the question. If you could clarify. And by the way, everyone. Amazon, I've heard a lot of people say, you know, can you go through a Black publisher or something like that? So I had to self-publish for several reasons. And as many of you don't know, writing a book and trying to get published is really a process. You have to essentially sell yourself to a bunch of people and make them think that your book is viable to their interests. And what you'll find is that a lot of publishers, their interests do not necessarily align with our interests. So to me, I'm like, all right, I already know this book's gonna be controversial, because I'm not taking this as white man, please save us from the system. No, the book I'm writing is more so Black people, you need to organize yourselves and take accountability for the fact that we have allowed ourselves to be taught this narrative that white supremacy, the dominant society, is the best option for us, and not take into account that the best asset that we have is ourselves. The best asset that we have is our ability to mend our relationships and to come together as a community. So that's very controversial, and not really like what you'll hear a lot of people speak about. So that was, one of the reasons that I basically decided to self-publish. And if you don't know, the easiest way to self-publish inside of the world today is Amazon. So someday, hopefully we can move it off of just that platform and go to a platform that's more Afrocentric. But for now, that's basically the means that I have at this point. And a lot of Black writers, honestly. If you go on Amazon, you'll see a lot of independent Black writers who otherwise would not be able to get published, who use that as the means to try to get a message out to the people. So, all right. So let's just talk about the way I think I'm going to do this is I'm just going to go through one chapter and just give like a summary of things that I said. Don't apologize for using Amazon. We have to do what was needed for advancement. And it wasn't an apology. It was more like I know that there are problems with this white supremacist capitalist system. Like I say this consistently on this channel, capitalism is what is inhibiting our people. And, it's true that we have to, unfortunately, use a lot of the vehicles of the system in order to reach our people. Because right now I'm on YouTube, right? YouTube's not Black owned. Most people who are pro-Black and who are active inside of the space, they're utilizing things that are actually not created by us. So that's just an acknowledgement, not apologizing, but I'm just saying, I understand that some people were saying, for example, Amazon doesn't sell in Africa, which obviously is a very big problem. I did make the book available on Kindle. So if anyone is over in the continent, or if anyone is anywhere where you can't get it shipped, absolutely, please try to get the Kindle. But I'm just saying, I understand that this is a system that's not going to do the best for us. You know what I'm saying? Again, for people just entering, I have my son, obviously, so I'm probably going to be getting up and getting down as I see him doing things. So don't let that startle you. Okay, so I'm going to just go through. I'm going to talk just briefly about the first chapter. And after that, I'm going to leave it open for any questions If any of you have questions about the content, you want clarification on anything, you know, I'm gonna try to keep it to the first chapter, but even if you have general questions about the book, just try not to spoil it for people who have not yet had a chance to read the book. So I'm looking for my outline. Give me a second, please. All right, so the first chapter is child welfare system racist. So the thing that we should understand about the child welfare system, again, the difficulty for us identifying systems of white supremacy is that they mask themselves as being for something that is admirable. So the child welfare system is one of those systems. You hear it talking about the welfare of children. And we know that obviously abuse is something that's horrible. You know, I would think all of us have an affinity for children who suffer. Checking different, okay. So all of us have these ideals of, you know, not seeing children get hurt, not seeing people suffer. And so it's kind of hard when you see a system that is talking about people, the people helping the people, and this system also happens to be doing things to the people. But that's something that occurs really throughout American society. If you think about the criminal justice system, for example, the criminal justice system, they put out this message that they're for public safety, they're for helping the community be safe, they're for reforming the criminal, so quote unquote, that's what they say that they're for. Now, do we think that the criminal justice system is really for that? Absolutely not. We should know, obviously, that the criminal justice system has its own agenda to subjugate African people and to ensure that the system of slavery continues. So I'm gonna walk away. 1 second, I'll be back. So the child welfare system is a similar type of system as what we see happening with the criminal justice system, okay? So I'm going to go through some of the things that we discussed. So one of the things that we should understand is that Black people are disproportionately represented inside of the child welfare system. What that means is that we encompass way more than we should of this system. So I'm going to give you some numbers that paint the picture of what I mean by disproportionate. So they say, according to the Census Bureau, if it is correct, that we make up about 14% of the United States population, right? Yet we make up 23% of children in foster care, okay? Now that doesn't seem too crazy, probably, if you've heard of other different disparities. That might not sound like the worst. So let's talk about more localized examples, because we have to understand Black people, we don't live everywhere in the US predominantly. A lot of us are in pockets inside of different regions. So if you look at that and say, well, we're only 23% of the child welfare population, that's not that serious. It's not painting a full picture that if you go to states where Black people are the majority of the population, that you're going to see that we are very much overrepresented inside of the system. So I'm going to just talk about a few. So Black people, we only make up about 5% of California's population, and yet 20% of the child welfare system in California. So that's 4 times our population inside of California. Then inside of Pennsylvania, we make up 13% of the population, but we make up 41% of the foster care population. Inside of, if you go inside of cities, certain cities, it's very much more apparent. So for example, in New York City, we only make up 15% of the population in New York City. Yeah, we make up 57% of the foster care population in that city. I want to say that again. Only 15% of the population, only 15% of New York children are African. Yet 57% of us are representative of the foster care population inside of New York. Chicago is, from what I've seen, the worst that I've saw. It makes sense because if you understand the history behind Chicago, you know Chicago is a city that has had a lot happen to it. So it says, while Africans make up only 26.7% of the population in Chicago's Cook County, they make up 76.8% of the foster care population. Again, 26% of the population, and yet we make up 76.8% of the foster care population. So there are 2 theories that are really predominant as to why this happens. These are the ones that you'll hear more so spoken about as far as the academics, right? So so you have this theory that Black people, we don't abuse our children more than white people. That essentially the system is doing this because caseworkers are racist. They have racial bias issues, and they look at us and they make stereotypes about us. And there's a lot of data to back this up. However, the other proposition is that it's true, Black people do abuse their children more than white people. Now, you might say that, look at that and say, oh, it can't be true. But it is true that if you look at the maltreatment rates, so for example, the likelihood that an African child is going to die inside of their family versus a white child, it is true. There is a disparity inside of treatment. What I argue in the book is that you can find different truths inside of both theories, and neither theory to me is completely captures the issue, because when you are oppressed people, when your master has inflicted violence on you, and you start to internalize that violence, when you have no access to resources, you're living in poverty, when you were basically someone who is at the mercy of a society that doesn't have any affinity for you to do right by you, you're gonna, have negative effects from that. Mentally, you're gonna have different effects. It's gonna affect your relationships. And I would argue that it will affect the way that you treat your children. So, for example, Dr. Amos Wilson, the famous and, very much, if you haven't read him, please read Dr. Amos Wilson, because he's great. He breaks down this whole idea that when we commit violence on each other, because we should know that we do commit violence on each other more than others, right? When we commit violence on each other, that's really because of the level of self-alienation that we feel being African people in a white supremacist society where we have no control over our future, we have no control over our ability to control our destinies. We're literally at the mercy of a white society that has no affinity for us to do right by us. That creates inside of you, you internalize a lot of negative feelings about yourself, and you essentially try to find some type of part of your life where you can control and can exercise dominance. And unfortunately, for a lot of us, that place where we try to exercise dominance is inside of our personal relationships. So I do agree that statistically, we are found to have maltreated, that's the legal term, our children more. Now, the issue is we have to break down what exactly is maltreatment, because maltreatment isn't just abuse. Maltreatment is anything that the system says we have to basically take your children from you. So maltreatment could be that you just don't have food on your table, and you have to work odd hours, you have to be out all night, you don't have enough money for childcare, so I'm gonna let my neighbor watch my child for me. She's gonna check up on him or her, and when I come back, I'm gonna do what I need to by my child. Well, the state agency could come in and say, well, no, you've neglected your child. Your child cannot be, one second. So the state agency can say, what you've done is you've neglected your child, and they could take your child on that. So yes, as white Americans are racist, yes, that poverty is criminalized in America. Being poor is a crime because it's a threat to the dominant society. And that's really what this book is about, that poverty has this effect to where the elite people, quote unquote, the white hegemonic class, they will do what they need to ensure that they can enforce subjugation of the people, because they see our poverty as a threat to their privilege. Understandably so, because if you get enough poor people in the world, eventually people are going to start striking back. Now, eventually people are going to start putting two and two together and saying, okay, you're not going to just live off of me, and we're like the majority of the population, and we're just going to be quiet, and we're going to stay inside of our lane and not challenge you. Eventually, enough poor people are going to challenge the system, whether peacefully or by violence. So that is true. Poverty is criminalized because they know that what they're doing isn't right, and they know that there are consequences, and those consequences are going to manifest one way or the other if they do not fix what they have created. So same thing with child welfare. We have a lot of issues that we struggle with. Drug use. Yes, we might use drugs to be an opiate to our issues, or you might be self-medicating because the system in America will not even do what they need to do to take care of people who have been violently assaulted by the system. Because to me, when people talk about reparations, the most basic reparation that the American society owes African people, to me, is free mental, among other things, free mental health services. You've enslaved our ancestors for 400 years. You have robbed these people of dignity. You've raped them. You've pillaged them. You've lynched them. Like, you've done horrible things to our people. And after that, you basically free all these people into the world and say, okay, go make something good of yourself while we continue to inflict violence on you and continue to subjugate you and continue to oppress you. Mentally, that's going to break down any individual. So when we're dealing with the issues of child maltreatment, my thing that I would say is that don't look at this as an indictment on the Black community. If we have found to do things to our children at a higher rate than other people, that's an indictment on the white supremacist system. These are all symptoms of white supremacy. These are all symptoms of oppression. These are all symptoms of what the system has created. We didn't create this circumstance. We didn't say we want to be abused by the system. We didn't say we want to be handicapped and put into an economic position where we can't get out of. That didn't come from us. That came from the white supremacist system. So if we inflict violence on our partners, if we inflict violence on our children, if we inflict violence on others in our community, the one whose blame that belongs to, that's the white supremacist system. So let's go on. So I talked about the two theories. My argument in this book is that regardless of which theory could or could not be right, whether it's that we abuse our children more, or whether it's just, no, we don't abuse our children more, the caseworkers and the judges, they're racist, that's irrelevant to what we're talking about, a system of social control. It could be the case that we do just, we are doing things at a higher rate, like I explained to you, because of the system that has created these results in our people. And the system could still be racist, even if they did treat us the same as they treat white people. Now, I do not think that for a second. I've seen racism in the child welfare system. Talk to any Black parent, they will tell you about the horrible treatment that they've received. But what I'm saying is that the purpose of the system, that's where we're going to get to what the truth is this a racist system or not? So the theory that I really loved when I was doing research for this book, because it really just broke down how this thing operates, is a theory called systems analysis. So what systems analysis says is, when you're looking at a system, so a system in society, you're not going to look at what the system says the system is for. So let's just take the criminal justice system, because of course that's one that a lot of our people are more familiar with at this point. The criminal justice system, again, says we're for the safety of the community, we're for rehabilitating the criminal mind, we're for doing all these things. Well, that's not what systems analysis is concerned with. Okay, system, this is what you say you're for, but what is actually happening? Meaning, systems analysis looks at the results. It looks at the outcomes, what is produced from your system. That outcome is what the actual goal is. So if we're looking at the criminal justice system as a systems analysis, we see that Black men, Black women are overly incarcerated, Black men obviously more. We see that families are torn apart. We see that Black people are stripped of their rights. Black people are stripped of their economic livelihood. They can't find jobs. All of these horrible effects from incarceration. Systems analysis would say, those things that we just listed, those are the actual goals of the system. The criminal justice system was specifically created to essentially make sure that Black families are not together, Black men and Black women are criminalized, that they do not have the ability to economically care for themselves. That's the goal of the system. So if you take a systems analysis when you're dealing with institutional racism, it will really open up your mind a lot more when you're looking at institutional racism. And of course, I want to assume, I could assume that you guys know this, but just in case, institutional racism versus individual racism. Racism in the United States, if you're talking about individual racism, you're talking about individual acts that one person might do to another person. So for example, let's say some white, we'll say a Trump supporter comes and calls me the N-word, and that's individual racism. Now, if that person is a part of a system, if that person is a part of the criminal justice system, the police department, is he's a part of the education system. And that system basically is the cover for him. That system is the one that is oppressing Black people, not just on an individual level, but on a systemic level. Then in that case, it's an institutional racism instead of an individual racism, even though it could be both at the same time. So when you look at the systems of the United States, the education system, horrible results for African children, horrible treatment of African children, criminalizing African children, same thing, social services, the welfare system, the criminal justice system. These are systems of racism. This is systemic racism. Unfortunately, a lot of the news sensationalizes individual racism. So we become preoccupied with the individual aspects of it instead of the systemic. And if you're just joining the broadcast, I said I'm going to be getting up and down for my child, so I will be right back. Okay, so getting back to systems analysis. Also, if you just joined, I said that anyone who wants to ask questions, I have the link to the broadcast right there. So you can just join in, and whenever I finish the presentation, if anyone has questions, we could talk. So again, systems analysis, if you're looking at the child, sorry, come here. If you're looking at the child welfare system with the systems analysis, what you're going to say is that, okay, they say that they're for protecting children. That's what they say they're for, but what is actually happening? Well, if you look at the results, let's go through some of what the things are that happen from the child welfare system. So one thing is that there are really harmful effects of what happens whenever you take a child from their parent. Just studies say that if you take a child from their parent, you are basically setting them up for significant mental issues or significant social problems, educational problems. There's even, and people even think that it's okay to take a baby from their mother, but that's actually not true. If you look at children, babies, infants that are taken from their mothers, they find psychological issues even in the babies. Because if you know anything about pregnancy, you're bonding to your child knows your voice. Your child is feeding off of your emotions. So they know their mother by the time that they leave the mother's womb. And if a caseworker comes into the hospital and takes that child, then yes, the child is having negative effects. The other thing though, is that once Black children are in the system creates horrible results for us. And that's something that we have to understand, because there's this mindset of, oh, your parent was abusive, so therefore the best result is that we take you out of this unsafe environment and put you inside of a better environment. But if you actually look at children who are left with their parents and compare those children who are similarly situated with children who are put into foster care, the children who are put into foster care have so many more problems. Because once you enter foster care, number one, you're likely to be moved a ton of times. So you're dealing with this trauma of destabilization. You don't feel secure. You don't feel like you have somewhere that is stable. You're basically never knowing, are they going to come and move me to another family? It's very easy for a foster parent to say, I no longer want this child anymore. They could say, oh, I'm over it, take this child away, and the state has to take them. But you're leaving it up to them. And now the child is basically being victimized from that. Other issues, Black children specifically, we are offered less visits with our parents. So if we're taking them to foster care, we don't get to see our parents as much. We get the worst mental health services, and just outcomes. Our outcomes are always the worst. The other thing about foster care is that there's a heightened risk of things like sexual abuse. Now, this is something that many of us probably don't want to think about. We think of foster parents as being these very kind people, right? And wanting to do the right thing. But the thing that we're not considering is that a lot of times people who may be, people who have who want to abuse children, we'll say that, might put themselves inside of positions where they can have access to children. So obviously we're common with things like the Catholic Church. We know about things like the Boy Scouts, with all these things, because people who are child abusers are going to put themselves in a position where they could abuse children. Same thing with foster care. You will have foster people sign up for being a foster child because they really intend to essentially assault that child. So that's some of the issues that come up whenever you are. I'm just going to read through one part of it. It says multiple studies show that children who remain at home have better turnouts. I already said that. I'm sorry. Children who are in foster care have higher rates of delinquency, teen pregnancy, homelessness, drug abuse, low-wage earners, physical, developmental and mental issues, and a higher likelihood of being on public assistance. All of this basically from being put into the child welfare system. So as a systems analysis, if we're looking at this with a systems analysis, all the things that I just listed, that is what the system was intended to do. The system was intended to take children from their parents and to essentially have the effect of destabilizing the entire family, possibly destabilizing the community, because again, we are made up of people. The people make families, and the families make up the community. The families who make up the community are basically going to be the political resistance against white supremacy. This is what the system was created to do. That's what a system analysis would say. So having a systems analysis outlook of what the system does, we can now have an appropriate analytical look at the system and go through the history of the system to have a better understanding of what exactly is going on, why are these results being produced, and why are people suffering. And that's literally what the following chapters go through. For people who, if you haven't bought the book yet, so the next chapter is going to go, and I'm not going to go through that now. We're just going to stick on chapter 1, but it's going to talk about the child welfare for whites, which was created, again, to subjugate Europeans. A lot of people don't know, whenever white people actually first came into the United States, I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. Whenever European immigrants, such as the Germans, the Irish, the Jews, I'm forgetting the Italians, those were the dominant groups that we know of. Whenever they came into the United States, they were not considered white. A lot of people don't know that. They were actually considered white N-words. That's what people would say. Because of that, the system reacted whenever all these people came into the United States. And that's really where the child welfare system was created. And then following that, we will see inside of the next chapter that the same thing was done to Native Americans. And then the chapters after that are going to break down, number one, our African culture as a family unit, and how the system had conspired to break down the family unit. And then something that a chapter I'm really excited for people to read, because this is a history I had no clue before I did this research, that after that, you have the problem of assimilationists. And a lot of people don't know, a lot of people in our history, people who fought for us, were really fighting for us to assimilate into white society. And a lot of that assimilation was based on the proposition that Black people, we have no culture that needs to be protected. We have nothing worth of value from Africa. Everything that we want to be, everything that we want to have is basically from American society. So our goal is to make sure Black children become a part of white society and become assimilated into the system. That is what a lot of the propositions of foster care really were. In fact, I'm going to just read from a quote from, there's an essay called The 5 Fingers, it's The 5 Faces of Oppression. And it's by a woman named Iris Young. It's a really good article if you want to read it. But it says, to experience cultural imperialism means to experience how the dominant meanings of a society render a particular perspective of one's group invisible at the same time as they stereotype one's group and mark it out as the other. Cultural imperialism involves universalization of a dominant group's experience and culture and its establishment as the norm. And that is what we're fighting against when we're talking about assimilation. So that's essentially the first chapter. It's not the first chapter. That's an overview of the first chapter. There's a lot of information that I did not cover. But like I said, every month I'm going to try to go through some big points from the next chapters. Good morning, Crematory. So I'm going to go through. I don't see anyone who's joined the broadcast. So maybe you guys are shy and you don't want to be on camera, which I completely understand. So I'm going to just go through and see if there's any questions from anyone. Okay, so what is the solution? Self-accountability and self-determination. How do we empower ourselves in order to break free from the system and empower ourselves? So that's something that I definitely discuss in the book. I would let you know right now my thoughts. What do we do with the white supremacist system? our biggest asset has always been ourselves. And I think that's something that we don't pay enough attention to. I personally believe that if we were not African, we probably would not have survived slavery. And what I mean by that is not that, Africans have superior genes, although I know some of you may feel that. It's that our culture was really what made us survive. Communalism, that is what made us survive. Whenever following slavery, what you've seen is an onslaught of violence against Black people and an intentional effort by the system to block us from any economic means or partaking anything from society. That was intentionally done. When you understand that the only thing that kept us alive was Black people basically having a form of self-governance, a form of us taking, one second, come here. Come here. So the only thing that kept us alive was us depending on each other. We had our own system of child welfare. A lot of people don't know that. Before we entered into the child welfare system of the United States, we took care of each other's children. We took care of each other's relatives. If your auntie, if her children couldn't take care of you, couldn't be taken care of. Here. So if your aunt, her children needed somewhere to go, they would stay with you. That was how we solved our problems. And so, in my opinion, we really have to look at how we can separate from this system, understanding that anytime a system has been controlled by your oppressor, oppressive being the white class, it's never going to be for you. I don't care if they are so well-meaning. And trust me, there are a lot of people who go into social services, who go into law because they're well-meaning. They want to, help. They want to be a champion for civil rights or for children. But the system, like I said, we're going back to a systems analysis. How the system deals with people is that the system has goals. So again, we're going to assume that the system of child welfare, that system was created to essentially oppress Black people by taking children from their parents at a higher rate, okay? If that's the system, then if you are someone who wants to become a part of that system and you want to change the system, that you will either have to conform to the system because you will get rewards from the system. So for example, let's say a lot of people say that you could be a Black prosecutor and be for the people. I personally don't agree with that, in my personal opinion. It's like my computer's slow. Okay, I think it's fine. Okay. Looks like my computer's freezing. Can you guys hear me? Okay, can you guys hear me okay? It looks like my computer's freezing. Okay, I think I'm back. So, okay, so what I was saying is that, so let's say you're a Black prosecutor, right? And you want to go into the system because you want to affect. That's something I hear often. In my opinion, the system is not going to reward you, the prosecutor. You are measured by how many convictions you can get. You're not measured about how you can change the system, how you can help Black people. That's not how you're measured. So the system, you'll either conform to the system or the system will do away with you. And if the system doesn't do away with you, you're not going to rise up the ranks. That's how systems deal with people. Think about good police officers, right? And there are Black people in the Black community who do love Black people, who don't want to do police brutality, who do stand against, racism. One second. Okay, here you go. They're all well-meaning people who join different police departments, right? But you're not going to be able to rise the ranks as a police officer who wants to do the right thing, because guess what? That means whenever that white police officer who's going to go out and oppress Black people, when he does what he does, that means you have to be the one to break the blue wall of silence. We know what happens when Black people try to break the blue wall of silence. If you don't know what happens, look at what happened to Chris Dorner. This is someone who loved being a police officer. And in his mind, he was going to be a good agent of inside of the police department. But what happened? The system dealt with him the way that they deal with people who oppose the system. So we have to view that the system already has this agenda, and it's already going to do it with or without you. So if you are someone who stands opposed to the system, it will simply to get rid of you. Is there any other questions before we call this first session? I'm reading through comments. We need a global Pan-African child welfare system too. Absolutely, but you know what you'll find if you talk to continental Africans, that it's like the whole social services system, which is just a testament to how the system is put into place to have an effect on us in America. It's not really a big thing inside of continental African countries, because as I said, if a child, if their parent, let's say their parent can't take care of them, they send them to the grandma. If the parent passes away, auntie takes the child, cousin takes the child, people step in. And that's why I was saying that, to me, that's the ultimate resistance that we have against this system, is to essentially say, okay, we're going to organize among ourselves like we have done in the past. And I just want to emphasize, and I talk about this in the book, that is literally what we did. And that's how we were able to produce the best results for our people. So, peace, Iyapu, how are you? Okay. So I think there's no more questions. I'll give anyone any more time to give me a question. Otherwise, I'm going to end this session. Okay, so I think there's no more questions. Thank you everyone for joining. So this is the first of different programs I'll do. So I'll cover chapter 2 when I do my program next month. I'm going to put, it looks like the whole book did not post inside of the comment box. So I'm going to put it inside of here, but I'm going to have to go through YouTube to do it. But thank you all for watching, guys. And I hope you read the book, Fostering Post Identity, How the Child Welfare System is Designed to, the child welfare system designed of social control of the Black family. All right. See you guys. Have a good day.